right. I've got Sean and Kendall here from NIVA. Thank you so much for joining. How are y'all doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, you bet.
Doing well. Happy Friday. Excited to reach your listeners today.
Yeah, absolutely. So the state of live is this thing that NIVA has been, pushing in the last week or so, and making quite a lot of noise about in a good way. Not saying that is a bad thing. And I think there's a lot of questions that I have that our audience might have, like, what is this? What's the point of it? Let's demystify this conversation and jump right in. Yeah. Why are you doing this? Yeah. What's the point? Yeah. All those things.
Well, Kendall, why don't you
kick things off?
Yeah.
Sounds good. So the State of Live is the first, what we're calling economic research study of the independent live sector. It sounds very, educational, and part of it is, but to summarize it, it's basically the storytelling that our sector needs to advocate for itself at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. We are essentially surveying the entire independent live industry, anonymizing all that data and putting together reports of data to tell the story, to tell economic impact, to tell economic health year over year, stats like that.
Yeah. And really to that point, the two things that this is going to do on the economic impact side, that's all the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Like, this is how many jobs we're responsible for and how many billions of economic activity and taxes and all that stuff. That's the puffing out your chest piece. But the other really important piece of this is, how are we actually doing? Because a lot of us in this know that we're not doing great. And unless we can get that message out with the economic impact and really understand, like, how are we doing? Are people making money? Are people barely making money? That's what will really help us tell our story when we're going to our state governments and our local governments and saying, hey, we need support, or we need a break on this or on that, because we really are important to our communities.
Got it. And you said, so this is one of the primary things that you're doing, Sean. So maybe share a little bit about yourself and, why you're, digging so deeply in on this.
Yeah, well, happy to. So I own a place called the Happy Dog in Cleveland, Ohio. We're a small 250 cap venue. We've got events 5-6 nights a week. Music is most of that, but we do community conversations. We do some spoken word stuff. I would say 3/4 of the acts on our stage are local, and 1/4 are regional, national, international touring. We probably do, well, I know because I just filled out the survey, we do over 250 days a year where we're presenting, and we present over 700 bands a year. So that's why this is particularly important for me right now. The reason I got to hit this place is I was active in the early days of NIVA and have been the chapter president for the state of Ohio and leading that advocacy effort. But even going back well before that, here in Cleveland, the music clubs organized to advocate for a reduction in admissions taxes years ago, back in 2010, 2011. So that's kind of part of what we do here. I'm a lawyer, and I got involved in policy making before I got involved in selling hot dogs at the Happy Dog. It's sort of a natural fit for me.
Yeah, and one of the things that you were mentioning before this call is that there's the UK Venue Trust that you said was about 10 years ahead, and some of this is model over that work. So if you could talk about what they're doing, what some of the findings were, and what are some of the key results that happened from this data. And I think there's a trail of things that is really compelling. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, what Mark David is doing at UK Music Venue Trust is really inspirational. And anybody who's seeing this, I would encourage you to follow him on socials and follow UK Music Venue Trust. So they have about a 10-year head start in gathering this data, and they're gathering it just for 600 cap and under venues. But what their data showed last year was the average profit margin for 600 cap and under venues in the UK was only half of 1%. And that 38.5% of the venues in the UK lost money last year. And I think the number is about 9% of venues actually closed permanently. And that's very powerful. I mean, it's sobering information, but it's powerful information. And because he has that information, some of the things they've been able to do in the UK is actually create that music venue trust. They are raising funds to actually buy the buildings that some of these venues are in to make sure that they're not gentrified out of existence. And just this week, they announced the purchase, their fifth purchase of a venue. It's Le Pub in Wales, a longtime music venue. So that's one very positive outcome. Another is that they have really pushed the thinking in the UK to say, hey, the small independent music venues are part of the artist development ecosystem, and you need to fund that ecosystem if you're going to have these artists playing on bigger stages. And they made serious headway in getting some of the bigger players to voluntarily agree to donate, in the UK, £1 a ticket on shows 5,000 cap and above, to a fund to help preserve the artist development pipeline system. That's the venues and some work to try and help the musicians in that pipeline.
Super interesting. It is very staggering and daunting data coming from the UK. I mean, it sounds like some good solutions are emerging though to try and help with that. So I guess what you're saying is one step of the process is like highlighting that there's this, real battle for existence and survival, and then local folks can use this to advocate, and then these programs like the music venue trusts are emerging. Like what could you, like, why is NIVA taking this on? Obviously I can hear how like helpful this is, but like, where does this fit into NIVA as an organization, what you're all doing in the future?
I can, step in here. So NIVA was founded in 2020 in a time of crisis, right? When every single venue and stage in the entire country closed. There was a phrase that people use, which was first to close and last to reopen. The 6-foot thing doesn't really work in a music venue. And so it was founded during a time of crisis. Our mission overall was to like preserve and sort of save those stages. Coming out of the pandemic, it's pretty easy to say we're in a post-pandemic world. And, that's a phrase that's thrown around a lot, but we don't know, and we don't have the data to quantify if it is a post-pandemic world business-wise, for our venues, for our festivals, for our promoters. And, we can't be a trade association representing every single stage across the country and not know if those stages are going to be able to sustain themselves in 10 years. So it's a really organic project for us because it is about the sustainability of our members and our folks that make up our everyday work. And we just think it makes a lot of sense giving people the tools that they need to advocate in every community. I know our internal staff, like if we could, we would go into every single visitors bureau and every single board meeting and like explain why this matters and explain, the cultural value, but we can't. There's too many. So the goal is to just, sort of give people the tools that they need to sustain themselves.
Yeah, I guess Oh yeah, I was gonna say. Please go ahead.
Like, this, a lot of stories out there are about, you see Live Nation's earnings report, and it's billions every quarter, and people see that. People see Taylor Swift tickets selling for $5,000, and that story of that part of the music ecosystem having come back and being well into the green is a story that's out there. And we know anecdotally, the situation is not the same for the independents. It's far from it. But our ability to tell that story beyond anecdotally really hinges on our being able to get the independent stages and promoters and festivals all across the country responding to this survey, so we can say, no, we actually have a story to tell here, and it's different than that story. And we have a different role in our communities than those bigger shows. What we do tends to stay in our community, and it's important, and it's at risk. And so that's why, for me, this is absolutely the most important thing NIVA has worked on since we managed to pull off Save Our Stages.
That's a powerful statement. The most important thing. That's I can see why you're saying that. So if I own a music venue, what what am I going to be reporting? Like, what's we should talk about exactly like what we're asking for. Like, what's the commitment on a music venue side? Like, how fast is this? Is this a 5-minute project? Is it a 30-minute project? Like, what are you all asking for from these venues?
Sure. So the timing depends on if the individuals filling it out come with the right documents. Before I get into what we are asking for in terms of data, I'd like to flag that the data is being highly anonymized. We are in conversations with folks every single day. We understand the importance and the secrecy of keeping their business information to themselves, and we respect the hell out of that. So we have partnered with an outside firm. No one internally at NIVA is accessing, their data. I say that because we are asking for things like ticket sales and how many people work at their venues, total attendance, tax documents will be asked as well. There's also sort of short answer responses on the survey to highlight the cultural impact that venues have. We're asking for, what kind of unique events do they have that serve their community on their stage? Year over year, is there any struggle? Is there any outside force that's been hurting their business this year a lot more than it did last year in terms of taxes or in terms of, mandates, things like that? So all that to say, we guess around 35 minutes. That's if they come with, the documents that they need. We have lots of tools available on our website, which is stateoflive.org. There's, a document that outlines what you'll need to get started, the exact types of people you need to talk to fill out the survey. We've tried to make it as easy as possible for folks. But yeah, we're super excited to, get going.
Yeah, from like a marketing perspective, I'm kind of half joking here, but if I hear 35 minutes, I'm probably thinking I can get it done in like 25 or 20 minutes. So maybe saying in less than 30 minutes they could.
Well, yeah, we did have a venue complete it earlier this week, and they said they did it in a cool 15. So
there we go. We'll say in as little as 10 minutes you could do this. If someone did 15, 10's possible.
Depends on your typing skills. So maybe, it's a little game of that.
Yeah, no, all jokes aside. So it's going to, the end result is going to be a report that everyone can utilize when they're applying for grants, when they're, so it's funny you said NIVA doesn't have the capacity to be in every single department. I can't remember the business bureau meeting that you had mentioned, but in a way, this is a way for NIVA to be a part of all of those. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yes. Well, a lot of what happens, it's NIVA members who are doing a lot of advocacy because we know with 8 people at the national level, we can't be a part of every fight on a noise ordinance bill in Austin, Texas, or parking dispute in Seattle, Washington. So really this is about giving NIVA's members the ammunition to go in and speak up for themselves. And that's why, in addition to the national report, every state plus DC and Puerto Rico will get their own sort of one-page, here are the highlights for your state. Mm-hmm. So you'll be able to, work at the state level. And as part of this, it's part figuring out how to pay for this thing, but it's also part an opportunity. We're going to be able to work with 10 different communities out of the gate to get actually MSA level data, so city level data. So cities where advocates are particularly passionate and interested in pushing for something at the local level have the opportunity to work with local partners to raise a little bit of money. It's $10,000 per community to actually get a city level report. And I know, I'm a big advocate for it. So I got the city of Cleveland on board. I got our Convention and Visitors Bureau to kick in $5,000 and Chris Ronaine, our county executive, to kick in another $5,000 because we want that data at the city level because we're pushing to create a Cleveland Music and Entertainment Commission. So that will give us more leverage in local government to be a part of conversations about entertainment district development and legislation and marketing of our city as a music city. We have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but to be able to tell the story of all the other music that happens every night in a city like Cleveland is key.
I love that. I was just thinking back in my head the questions that you're asking for from these venues. You mentioned the UK trust situation. They actually have profit margin. I can't recall if you mentioned that in this survey. Are they going to be speaking to their profit margin, or is it purely just attendance and ticket sales and the challenges that they're facing?
It's estimated profit margins as well, but we know exact data is not the goal here. We're going to have a lot of data from different people across the country, and that's going to be extrapolated. So if folks are freaking out because they don't know if it's, something, something one or something, something two, we're looking for estimations as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate, because we reiterate this one all the time, we're not asking for your tax returns. We're not asking for your tax ID number, any of that kind of stuff. We are asking sensitive stuff, but nobody at NIVA and nobody who's a member of NIVA will ever be able to access any of the individual responses. We're only going to see aggregate level data. So if you're worried about being put at a competitive disadvantage, or your competitor finding out that you're doing something they don't know that you're doing, or you're worried that an agent's going to find out that you're not doing as well as you're projecting out to the world that you're doing, they're not going to find out. The controls in place are locked tight. Nobody's going to be able to see that except Techonomy, and then they're going to wipe that.
Yeah, so you're not creating a public kind of version of Polestar or anything with this, and a lot of promoters, and I think what you're getting at is there's a lot of people know that NIVA is like a for us, by us type company, meaning a lot of people on the board, yourself included, run music venues and in close relationship with Nito, but the whole point of the third party is to really kind of scramble and anonymize that data is and that's what I'm hearing correctly. And there's if I'm sorry, am I hearing that correctly? And there's no one at NIVA that's going to have any sort of advantage that anyone else will have, because you're going to see the final report in the same way that everyone else is going to see the final report. Is that right?
Exactly. There was an individual today who completed the survey to, ask if they could see a copy of their responses. And I said, I can't show you that. Let me give you Marty's email. Marty is our chief economist. We take it very seriously. Even if it's one comment, one question over email, we're not doing it. We've put so much work into this project. To undermine the integrity of confidentiality is not what we're all about.
That's a good point. So who is this third party that's doing this for y'all?
Sure. So they are Techonomy. It's TECONOMY. We had a 6-month, 8-month process, Sean, of looking for the right partner in this. Basically, Techonomy has done economic impact reports for other association like organizations like the gaming industry and like pharma. They're not a part of the music industry, although our chief economist Marty was in a band, so he gets it, as we like to say. But yeah, they have signed an NDA with us. Every piece of data is protected, and they are just super invested in this project as well. They both Marty and his team, attend live music, and they want to see live music in their community succeed. Sean, anything else to add about Techonomy?
Yeah, I would just say, Techonomy was a great partner, and we did go through this process to identify them. But their reputation hinges on making sure that they keep that confidentiality. Like, they're not going to be able to do any more work for any other associations if there's any kind of breach of
course, yeah,
individual responses on this stuff. So that's just an added layer of, you don't have to worry about what you're putting in, anybody seeing it ever at the entity level. But it really will, the more people who respond, the better position we'll be in to say, hey, this is meaningful, these responses.
And that we should call this out as well. On top of, we'll say it in as little as 10 minutes, perhaps as much as 35 minutes, they get, this amazing, and the end result is going to be, hopefully far worth the 10 to 35 minutes that anyone spends on it. But there's a short-term benefit as well. If you're going to NIVACon, the badges are discounted if you fill this out. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. We want to incentivize everyone to take this survey. NIVACon, we are the National Independent Venue Association. I don't think we've mentioned that yet, so maybe good to put the name in there.
Yeah.
But we represent promoters, festivals, independent PACs. So we put on a conference every year. In June, we're going to be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which has some awesome music venues.
It's my hometown.
Oh, really? Oh my God. That's so funny. We'll have to talk about, we'll promote their music venue names on here later.
Yeah. Pat, shout out to Pat's Theater Group. Definitely.
Yeah.
We love them in Milwaukee.
Grab a drink at the Cactus Club with you too.
Oh yeah. Okay. Shout out to Cactus Club as well.
Yep. Paps is super.
There's a bunch of them.
There's some awesome venues.
The rave. Yeah.
Yeah. That we got to visit Milwaukee as a staff through the site visit, and I hadn't been yet. It was just so awesome. The like,
it's cool for sure.
Music venues, small, large, and they're all packed in a couple miles. It's really, really cool. Anyways, there will be a 20% discount on NIVACon 25 if you fill out the survey. And, we've talked a lot about NIVA so far. I just want to emphasize this is for NIVA members, and this is also for non-NIVA members. If you've never heard of NIVA before this podcast, you're still eligible. It's festivals, it's promoters, it's university presenters. If you have a stage and you do something on that stage and people laugh or cry or dance or sing, you can take the survey. I just want to reiterate that as well.
Yeah, incredible. Oh shit, I was blanked on what I was gonna say, but I really did just blank. Good God, we were talking. Where were we? We were talking about Milwaukee.
Yeah, added incentive to take advantage of the 20% discount. It's the very first presentation at the conference is going to be this data.
Okay. I remember what I was going to say. Okay. There was like something very specific. So another thing that we talked about too, is this is not going to be something that folks need to do next year or the year after that. It sounds like this data will, maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, you will kind of refresh it but if people are advocating in 2028, like this will likely still be relevant data, like a report, from a governmental perspective, there's like, am I saying that right? There's probably like a 3 to 5 year window where this stuff is like, you could use it for a grant and it would qualify. It wouldn't be out of date for the next 3 to 5 years. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Save Our Stages SVOG was 2020, and we still talk about it all the time as, the largest arts grant, $16 billion to the industry. This is not going to be quite as big as that, I don't think, but yeah, it's not something that we can do on a yearly basis. Most likely it's a lot of effort internally. It's a lot of money to fund something like this. So all that to say, if you don't fill it out this year, if you think you have next year, you don't. This is your shot for the next couple of years. So take advantage.
That's a good point. Yeah, I guess you could look at it from both perspectives. On one side, you don't have to do it again. If you do fill it out, you don't have to do it again. On the second side, if you wanted to fill it out, now is your chance. When do they have? When can they fill it out by? Till?
So February 18th. It opened January 7th, just a couple days ago, and they have until February 18th. You'll be able to go in and out of the survey as long as you follow the same link. All directions and things like that are up on our site as well.
Great. Well, I want to maybe put on a different hat for a second here and turn to you for a second, Sean, and ask you a question about just what it's like running a music venue. And, unfortunately, one of the conclusions that you're, I think, probably rightfully so, preemptively drawing about what you're going to see in the data is that it's hard out there for music venues, and you have the headlines of Live Nation making billions, but then collectively the independent promoters are, really, really struggling for survival. That is sad to hear, even post pandemic, but it's also not surprising to hear as well. But, you've been running a club for 16 years now, a small venue, 250 capacity, I believe is what you said. And if you could talk a little bit more about that, like what is so challenging about running a venue? Have things gotten better since in what ways have things gotten better since the pandemic, since the founding of NIVA? In what ways is it still challenging? And I think, after that conversation, I'd like to brainstorm about like how can the industry collectively, run a report and it's thriving, versus something that is going to be used as like a life-saving thing to get that grant that's going to keep someone from shutting down or whatever.
Yeah. Well, the reason a lot of us do it is not the money, but we need to be able to sustain ourselves in doing it. Like in pre-venue days, I was a lawyer. I was a lawyer up on Wall Street. I made a lot more money doing that than I've ever made doing the Happy Dog, but I've had a much bigger impact on my community, more engagement with my community doing the venue. And so, the rewards are not monetary rewards, but you can't afford to lose money doing it. So, there's not an expectation that, hey, this is a lucrative career to get into. No, this is always going to be a place where people who are passionate about music and passionate about community are going to be willing to do that instead of being an insurance salesman. But, the conditions post-COVID are worse than pre-COVID because inflation, the cost of the hot dogs we buy and the beer we buy to sell our customers, that's gone up, as has the electricity cost, as has the waste removal cost. All those costs are up. The labor costs are up, which is a good thing because people working in the industry need to be able to afford to live, but it also has to be sustainable. Alcohol consumption's down. And we do have great NA options, but people who are buying 2 NAs a night who used to buy 8 PBRs a night, the math still isn't working in your favor. And we're fighting against streaming. We're also fighting against the decline in local media. So there is no commons you can go to find out what's happening. Everything has gone so niche and so global and so niche that we don't have those local community commons to be able to look in the alternative press, the local alternative press, and see all these shows listed.
I guess one of the reasons why you want to do this survey is so that you could answer a question like what I'm about to ask. But in an environment where your expenses are going up, I'm wondering if we set that aside, has attendance gone up? Has the number of shows gone up I guess for you? Or I have an assumption that that popularity of venues are growing, but perhaps expenses have ballooned beyond the attendance growth. Am I correct about that, or is there indicators in the other direction?
Well, it's going to vary city to city, and Cleveland is not a population growth city.
Yeah.
So our attendance hasn't fallen off.
Yeah.
And our population growth is flat. But the individual spend is down. The ticket prices are up. So, the total revenue is flat. Our model is we pay the artists who play our club 100% of the door. So we're making less money. The artists who are playing our stages are making more money, reflective of inflation. So that's just putting pressure on us. I do worry about sort of younger crowds having the same affection for the experience of going out and seeing live music versus going out to, say, a Taylor Swift dance party or a Harry Styles dance party, the themed parties. I do worry about the number of younger artists getting out on the road, so that the total talent pool that's out there in touring, because the cost of touring's gone up. Kids who grew up during COVID may not have had the same experiences in terms of coming together to play music in a group versus being able to create music yourself. And the feedback loops of that, whether, you're getting your dopamine hit through people reacting online versus being on a stage in front of people and getting that immediate feedback is different. So, I'm worried, but I do know, music is so elemental to
Yes.
as
the humanity. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
the data. Go ahead, please. I want you to complete.
Well, no, I mean, that's just the thing that gives me the comfort when I'm looking at the numbers and I'm looking at,
right.
Like last night when it's 19 degrees here in Cleveland and nobody's out because it's the first or second week of January, and you're going, how long is this going to last? Well, ultimately people need music.
Yeah.
Come back to music, but it just, doesn't make it easy on a Thursday night in January.
Yeah, I do. I hear you for sure. I do think that there's like interesting kind of shakeups that are occurring, and I'm just plucking insights from like 1,000 conversations I've had with different promoters, but if the data, and I do think the data says this, that there's more people going to concerts, but then there's these mega concerts that, there's more arena tour, or not arena, stadium tours that are happening. And obviously consolidation at the stadium level is like, pretty unequivocally a monopoly or a duopoly at best. So there's, a couple businesses that are benefiting from that. And then, like there's this question. Yeah, I think we're in the first time, it's post-pandemic is the first time we've ever seen people pay consistently $800 tickets or $1,000 tickets to shows. So there's a question of like, is that having this trickle-down effect where, the $800, the one show is taking up what used to be spent over 4 or 5 shows. So I think that there's, there is a kind of bizarre shakeup right now. Like I wonder if the post-pandemic pent-up demand sent a bunch of club level acts to the arena and the stadiums in a way that was like artificial. So many bands that I were following, I'm like, what? They're playing arena tour? Like I never saw them getting beyond, Mohawk and Austin, let alone graduating to like Stubbs. Like graduating from Mohawk 800 capacity to Stubbs 2,500 capacity. Like when I was that used to be a huge deal. But now it's like these arena tours are just popping up out of nowhere. And I think there's people on that level that are like hoping that it keeps coming, and these acts are, keep getting booked on that level. So, I wonder if there's like a balancing of the force that is just happening slower than our human lives. Fast when you zoom out and you look at like the history of the country and how much of a shakeup the pandemic was, but painfully slow when it comes to your perspective as a venue owner that's trying to make it through January.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just wondering if it's like, I think the growth is happening and it's just happening in weird pockets. And your point about like NA and inflation is eating up some of the increases in attendance. And by the way, like maybe I'm just being idealistic here or not. I don't disagree that the dopamine hit of, looking at your phone is appealing, but it's also, I think, really bad for mental health over the long run. I guess in my own life. And I am optimistic the kids are going to be drawn to more real world experiences, and especially after they shake off some of the bad habits that were formed at COVID. And, if anything, I think the trend has shown that like as the digital experience becomes more and more kind of intoxicating in not such a good way, people will want that real world physical experience. And then, this generation's making more music than has ever been made before, and they have the tools to get bigger than they've gotten faster, right? Like the level of A&R you would have to go through, or development you'd have to go through to be an act that was like presented at a national level, in the 90s is, yeah, I mean, nowadays you can just start making music, get lucky in your parents' bedroom, release a track, and then you're Billie Eilish, a year and a half later. Granted, that's like a unicorn story. But it happens. It would have never happened 15 years ago. So I have a little bit more optimism, but I completely understand your apprehension as well at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a couple of things there. I mean, I think you're right. And if you take a more glacial timeline scale, everything's going to be fine. It's just so many of us who are in the ecosystem now run so tight to the bone that
you got to make it through January. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that piece of it. And then I think, there's a perception that people can go Billie Eilish like that. And I think that gets twisted a bit, because I know, Bob Lefsetz did something like, is it worth saving the clubs or something like that? And he was saying, oh, Chapel Roan, she did one opening slot and now she's national. But then if you go back and actually look, she had 250 shows at small clubs, kind of refining her act and developing an audience and a rapport with the audience before she came out of nowhere and did that. So, the bedroom to the
Bob Lefsetz is going for eyeballs, and what do they call that? Like the kind of shock factor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
but that's also why like the UK model is so interesting, because they really are focused on, hey, they've looked and said a show at a 200 cap club, the ticket price should be £30 if you're going to cover everyone's expenses. But that just isn't going to work. That's a 15 pound ticket in the UK. So if you still need that ecosystem to exist to help get artists that stage experience. And not just that, it's not just a focus on, hey, how is something going to get huge? These stages are really important to our communities. Like,
Absolutely.
when I say
Absolutely.
3/4 of the bands that play on our stage are local, it means they're playing for their families and friends, which is important for those bonds, but they're also being creative and expressing themselves. And that's important to the mental health of a community. Like, I really think these clubs are key to a civil society, because you're bringing people who aren't the same together, and then they are able to bond over something
Agreed.
and
Yeah.
create ties that mean, instead of sitting at home and going, I'm with this tribe and against that tribe, it's like, oh, all of these people are at this show and they're all people. And maybe I should just calm the fuck down and actually live my life.
I want to backtrack a little bit to what you said about like the brutal circle of inflation, and you said one silver lining of the labor going up is that people are getting more, but that's like they're it's not more money on one layer, it's more money to them, but it's not, because everything else is expensive. And I think back to it, as much as we want to be through the kind of shakeup that was COVID, it is a glacial pace that things are resolving, and you can tie the inflation to a lot of things that happened during COVID, not just COVID. But there's inflation that's out there, and it's a brutal time for our economy. And I think people have yet to, it depends on who you ask, and I'm not trying to make a political statement here. There was a recession, or there wasn't a recession. History will look back on this moment as a recession. I think, at least or at least a time of like, economic strife, and it's like pure, the only reason why it's not seen as a recession perhaps is like the inflation. But then when you look at the day-to-day kind of suffering that has put in place from the inflation, we haven't seen something like this, since at least 2008. And maybe it's perhaps even worse than 2008. And this is not a violin store, I don't have my world's smallest violin out for just our industry specifically. I mean, it's felt across, I think the entirety of the, upper middle class, and all the way down to, the more impoverished side of the country as well. So part of this is just making it through this period, and I think God willing, we guide ourselves out of this inflation and get to a good place. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think we need to address that directly, that it's not COVID. It's not the second coming of 6 foot distancing, which Kendall kind of brought up, but it's another thing. It's like, now it's time to, all right, you survive that, but now you got to survive inflation. It's a whole other meteor or event that everyone is going through.
Yeah.
If I could briefly add, and I'll caveat this by saying one of my best friends in college, which was not that crazy long ago for me, managed a band, and they started out really ground level, and now they're making their way across the DC circuit. So I don't believe that, that whole process is dead. I'm a follower of them. And yeah, I will just add something that we've seen across the board from the NIVA side and our advocacy committee and all that, not speaking for Sean, but we've seen also in the past couple years post-COVID a widespread increase in like the predatory ticketing practices.
Yeah.
And that is just a huge issue that has come up and has increased in full force. And, that could be a whole nother podcast in itself, in my opinion. But
yeah, I've talked about it. Yeah.
I'd be remiss not to add that as an extra nail in the coffin for our small businesses.
Yeah, I mean, shout out. I had a podcast with Dana and Steven before NIVACon last year, and we talked about this, and and we should probably revisit it. Yeah, so it's just this giant, like, kind of cauldron of all these different things: inflation, spec tickets, $800 Taylor Swift concerts, like. Shit's real right now, for sure. Yeah, a lot
small
running
bands
around.
making it through. There are still the small bands making
Definitely.
it through.
And this industry is resilient. I mean, we made it through COVID. We can make it through anything. But it's one part of me, as an entrepreneur, I always try and kind of question, like, I don't know, what are the big assumptions that can be challenged? And it is sad to me that you said, Sean, you're not wrong in saying this, that it's like it's not the lucrative choice. I agree with you on that one. But at what point maybe NIVA, and I look at Prism and part of this battle. Maybe our like true success metric is if that conversation changes at one point, and it's like, it's a cool, interesting, sustainable, lucrative living doing this, and you also get the opportunity to like wildly impact your community in a way that fighting global counterterrorism with the JD, it does not do. You're making an impact in another way back in your past life, Sean, but yeah, not as meaningful to the Cleveland community as Happy Dogs and the Fruit Loop hot dogs and local bands.
Yeah, you would want that, and I would hope for it. And we got started
Possible,
during in
yeah.
2008, 2009. In a way, 12.
Yeah,
It used to be $5 to see a band, and you can get a beer and a hot dog for $10 back in 2009. That was entertainment versus something expensive. These days, not quite double those prices, but it's still a hell of a lot cheaper than flying out to Vegas and trying to see a show at the Sphere.
yeah. Oh my God. I mean, which is a awe-inspiring, fun experience, but it's kind of like, gosh, yeah, the cost of doing that and compared to just going to a show at your local venue is quite different.
I feel like it all loops back, like not to do full circle moment, but like all of us understand the feeling of like standing in a room of a small band and just having like a transcendental moment.
Yeah.
But not every like stakeholder who we're like trying to get listened to the sector has that same experience. Like not everyone's a creative.
Right.
Everyone like has this passion for music. And I think that's why what we're doing is important, because we're trying to bridge the gap and like tell our story in the way that they'll hear it, which is numbers. Like the world is quantified these days. So like, if what we've been doing in the past as a sector doesn't work, if playing the cultural battle hasn't worked completely, maybe it's time to do numbers next to culture. I know I went back, but that's
and it's funny, and I think this is why like the Ticketmaster meltdown with Taylor Swift tickets was so relatable, because like the senators' kids and cousins and whatever were actually complaining about that. So perhaps that was a little bit of a foot in the door to be like, hey, look, like, guess what? You care about, turns out you do care about live music. Well, there's this whole industry that's like lifting up that experience, and a key part of eventually the experience arriving at Taylor Swift. And here's how the sausage is made of that whole experience. And yeah, and now that we got everyone's attention, maybe that's one way to look at it. It's like there's, this is a unique moment where I think people are paying attention a little bit more, which is good. So, NIVA's got to swoop in and launch this report and bring it to the next level. And one thing I want to mention is, as I'm remembering, just a quick little Prism plug. I do, just similar to NIVA, like my hope is to help sustain the industry, B, get us to a point where the conversation changes and it's actually lucrative. And I remember Kendall, the reason why we got started talking about this is I was telling Steven about this new thing that we just launched, which is called Insights. And it is actually a public version, not a public, but like a more kind of open version of what you're all trying to do with the census, where promoters are essentially agreeing to share data and on artist performances. And my goal with that is to make sure that if anyone's booking talent, they have the appropriate data to, make smart financial decisions. But then secondly, to discover all sorts of bands that they might not have discovered. And we're getting to a point where we can make AI recommendations like, hey, you just booked, so-and-so local band in Cleveland. Like, here's 30 other bands in the market with venues that you're working with that are, that they're booking and they're performing well. And you haven't worked with them yet. So like, maybe you should reach out to them and work with them. Anyway, I wanted to mention that's why. And in my head, something's still floating around about how we can like connect these two projects. I mean, the timing was like so similar and interesting, but I know I owe you an email back on that one. But anyway, like I appreciate what you're all doing. We're trying to play our part in a small way. NIVA's playing a part in a small way, in a big way. And, I just wanted to say, thanks for doing what you're doing. Long story short.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool project as well. And it piqued my interest as soon as I saw the video as well. So hopefully more talks to come, but
it's a need for the industry for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for taking the time to talk about this because, yeah, NIVA can be a great storyteller, but only if people respond. Like we need, and it's your clients who are like, Prism client base. That's the people who need to take this survey.
Yeah.
And, if you got an SVOG grant, hey, take the time, fill out the survey. We're trying to do good things like that, but we need participation to be able to effectively do it.
All right, let's do it. Yeah. All right. So here's to a bright future. Let's take one small step, as little as 10 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, but we'll call it as little as 10 minutes. This could really impact the future of live music and get us through this crazy moment. Like we're almost through the shakeup, the hurricane that hit us back in 2020, dealing with a little bit of inflation right now, some weird ticket prices, scalping. Like this is yet again another thing that could help. So let's all team up together and make it happen. And yeah, thank you again for your time.
Thanks so much. It's at stateoflive.org. I'm just going to say one more.
Okay. I'll post in the podcast as well. Stateoflive.org. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.